Number 1. College Christmas. I recently heard a story on your channel, Killer Orange Cat, about someone who spent a portion of their winter break in their college dorm. I was a bit surprised to hear about it because it reminded me of a similar experience that I had during my freshman year of college. I also had to spend the Christmas break alone in my dorm room. In this instance, I had a roommate, but he went home. It was also more lonely since I was used to having someone around all the time. Although I was enjoying having the room to myself the entire time, with the lack of people on the campus, in the surrounding town, and in my dormitory, having the room to myself suddenly became very lonely. I spent a lot of time watching television. It didn't start snowing until the time was getting closer to Christmas. When it did, it really came down hard, and it was not stopping. I had a really small Christmas tree that I had sitting on my desk. And I also spent a lot of time watching TV and eating microwave dinners. I hadn't thought much about what I was going to do on Christmas, though. My family sent presents for me to put under my little tree, so I did open them up in the morning. I then called them and talked to everyone, but that was all in the morning, and by noon, I really didn't have anything to do. So the afternoon went by with me watching game shows on the Game Show Network. They were playing lots of Christmas-themed shows. It began getting dark around 3:30 and was completely dark by 4:15. At that point, I was going to fix the TV dinner I had bought for the special day, a huge Hungry Man turkey one. But before I did, I decided to maybe look around and see if any restaurants were open. Being that most of them were near a deserted campus, I didn't have much hope. However, I was able to find a sort of mom-and-pop sit-down restaurant off campus that was open. I had never heard of it, but I felt it would be nice to get out of the dorm for a few hours. I took a bus on the way there, although I figured one wouldn't be running on the way back. It was on the whole other side of town, but a walk home in the snow on Christmas did sound like a decent idea. The restaurant was rather nice, nothing too fancy. It was a lot like a baker's square or something like that. They had a nice ham. In fact, although this is not really important to the story, I did go back to this place in several following years. Since I knew I was already going to have to walk home, I stayed a bit late. I was able to have a dessert, and they didn't card me, so I was also able to get a few glasses of wine as well. By the time I was heading home, back to my dorm, it was already around 11 p.m. It was still snowing when I left. Being late on Christmas Day, and in an empty college town, it wasn't shocking that I spent most of the time walking home without encountering many people. As I was walking along, though, I did notice what I assumed was a homeless man sitting up against a brick building. It was still snowing hard, so I wasn't able to get a very close look at him until I got closer. But it definitely was someone sitting on the sidewalk against the front of a building. I couldn't imagine anyone other than a homeless person doing that. So then, as I got up close, I thought maybe I would toss him a few dollars. It wouldn't be enough to get him a hotel room for the night, but at least maybe some hot food somewhere. I fished into my wallet to find something as I approached the man. As I did, he surprised me by jumping up at me. I felt a sudden pain in my chest and then in my face. Something caused me to collapse onto the ground. The homeless guy was on top of me, and I tried to knock him off. The building he was sitting in front of was a bar. Someone in the bar noticed what was happening and came out and started yelling. The man who attacked me jumped off me and advanced on the man who had come out of the bar. That man retreated. I was to learn later that my attacker had a fillet knife on him. He had used it to stab my chest and to slash my face. Then he threatened the man in the bar, who retreated. The attacker took my wallet and ran off after that. Once the guy was gone, 2 men from the bar got me into the bar while calling the police and an ambulance. I had to have stitches, but thankfully nothing essential had been damaged. I had a credit card from my parents for emergencies in the wallet, but it was canceled before it could be used. The guy who attacked me was not discovered. For a very long time, I was nervous walking around town at all. I kept thinking I would be attacked again, but I never was. Number 2. House. I want to preface this story by saying I'm sorry if it is a sad story in any way. Furthermore, this happened a very long time ago. I don't know if that means that it is less likely to happen today or not. However, I think if it did happen today, people would find out about it pretty quickly, thanks to how quickly things spread on the internet. I didn't always have a lot of friends when I was growing up, but when I was 12, I made friends with a guy named Charlie. It was one of those odd relationships, because Charlie had been in the past hanging out with some people who had made fun of me. But he never had himself. It seemed like he stopped hanging out with them, and for some reason decided to hang out with me instead. Since he never really teased me, I wasn't surprised to hear that he told me that he had, indeed, stopped hanging out with those 3 people because he hated the way they bullied me. It was nice really having a good friend. It began in the autumn school session. I find myself searching for what we called that part of the school year in junior high school. I know it wasn't semesters, but being as I remember my college years a lot more clearly, semester is the only word that is coming to mind. But Charlie and I spent a lot of time together, and it seemed that his friendship with me kept the other kids from picking on me that much. Charlie told me that his parents tended to have Christmas dinner on Christmas Eve, where my family had it on Christmas Day. He told me that his parents gave him permission to invite me over. My parents were probably happy that I had an actual friend, that they agreed to it rather easily. They didn't even ask for his parents' phone number to call and coordinate anything. I was just allowed to go. Before this time, I was never over at Charlie's house before. I had, in fact, no idea where he even lived at. This was the first time I had been invited over to his house. It was snowing when Charlie showed up at my home. He told me he didn't live very far away from me, so we'd be able to walk. It was already dark out, and that made it a bit hard to see in the snow. We eventually came to a darkened house. I was a bit nervous walking up to it and wondered why it was so dark. Charlie didn't answer me, though. We just walked up to the house, up to the front step, and Charlie opened the door. The inside of the house was just as dark as it had looked from the outside. I was a bit worried because the whole thing just seemed really weird. Being that I had been a kid who was pretty unpopular and sometimes bullied, I found myself particularly frightened at the very strange circumstance in which I found myself. However, I did go into the house with him. It only took a few minutes for me to realize that the house was not Charlie's home. Yeah, I know I should have realized it from the beginning, but I didn't think Charlie was the type of person to mess with me. I mean, who wants to think poorly of their first ever best friend? Walking into the living room of what I realized was an empty house. The 3 friends of Charlie's that he had stopped hanging out with were there. And it hit me that Charlie wasn't really being my friend. These guys had set me up in quite an elaborate hoax, and I fell for it because I wanted to have a friend. The 4 guys grabbed me and roughly dragged me over to a door. They opened it and pushed me down a small staircase. Before I was able to get up, they closed the door and left. When I was able to get up and go to the staircase, I realized they had locked me in the basement of an abandoned house on Christmas Eve, and I was terrified. I tried everything I could to get out, but the house was old and the door was strong. There was not another door leading outside, and there were no windows in that basement. I'm not sure how long I struggled to find a way out, but it was quite a while, and I only quit when I was so tired that I finally had to go to sleep. I cried myself to sleep, realizing that I was going to miss Christmas with my family, and that if no one found me, I could possibly die in that basement, and no one would really be able to find out who did it. Fortunately, there was a running sink in the basement, so I was able to get water, but there was no food or a way to get out. I didn't know how long I spent down there, but it was an awfully long time. I thought I would end up starving to death in that basement. Fortunately, someone did eventually come to the house. It was not Charlie, though. It was a member of that group of bullies. He told me he had no idea how long the other guys were going to leave me there, and he wasn't trying to kill me, just scare me. He brought me some food and helped me out of the basement. Spent 4 days in that basement, missing Christmas and starving. I didn't turn the guys in, and I didn't turn in the guy who rescued me from his other friends. I was too scared of retaliation. Apparently they were scared too, that I would turn them in. None of them bullied me ever again. Number 3. Stranger. My mom left my dad when I was really young. It's really hard to remember much about her, and we have not reconnected since. There were 4 of us kids. I was the second youngest. After she left, my dad, who already had an alcohol problem, just got worse and worse. He very often would go out to the bars and get so wasted we would not see him for days. This happened a long time ago, and my family lived out in the country. That's why we were never put in with another family. People in that area did not interfere in each other's business as much as we do now. I sort of wish they had, and then perhaps I would have had a much better childhood. But this happened on Christmas Eve when I was 9 years old. My oldest brother was 14 at the time. My dad had gone out to the bars early in the day, and we honestly did not expect to see him back that night. We wouldn't really expect to see him back the next day either. As I mentioned, however, this wasn't unusual to us, not even on Christmas. My youngest brother still believed in Santa Claus, and thought he would be coming to see us. He spent a long time looking out the window, hoping that he would be able to catch a view of the jolly old fat guy. My older brothers were fine with that, as it technically kept them from doing much to watch over him. They hung out in the bedroom while my youngest brother and I were in the living room, he watching out the window and me watching TV. It was pretty late at night when my younger brother startled me. He claimed that he had found Santa Claus. I tried to quiet him up, but he wouldn't do so. Finally, after him carrying on that he had seen Santa Claus in our yard, I finally went over to the window and asked him to show me. We had a really huge yard, as I mentioned. We lived in a rural area. At first I didn't see anything, as it took my eyes a little bit of time to get adjusted to the dark. But eventually, much like my youngest brother, I did notice that there was someone in the yard. It wasn't my dad, and even at 9 years old, I didn't believe in Santa Claus, so I immediately got up and got my older brothers. My oldest brother, Kenny, looked out and saw it too. There was someone moving around in our yard. Whoever it was wasn't coming up to our house, though. Kenny was pretty macho for his age, and he decided to go out and see what the guy in the yard wanted. He told the other 3 of us to stay in the house. We watched as our brother went out to confront the person in the yard. It was hard to really know what was going on because it was so dark, but after several moments, we heard an awful screaming noise coming from outside. We were unsure of what was going on, but we did notice a figure coming up to our house, and it was way too big to be our brother. My second oldest brother, Billy, quickly locked the door of the house. He told us not to let anyone other than Kenny in the house, and he told us he would be right back. He ran down the hallway. The figure reached the door, and I was able to see him through the window. He was a really big, dark, and strange-looking man. He began beating on the door, asking us to open the door. My youngest brother and I were terrified and ran away from the door. We kept waiting to see what Billy was going to do. Billy showed up with our dad's pistol. He got into a yelling match with the man outside, and both of us younger boys were frightened, terrified. Billy eventually at one point opened the door and threatened the man with the gun. It was tense, but my brother fired a shot that eventually scared the guy off, and he went running. Billy told us to lock the door behind him while he went and checked on Kenny. After a while, he helped Kenny back into the house. Kenny had been stabbed and his face was also bloody. Billy called a cousin of ours who drove over and then drove Kenny and Billy to the hospital. Me and my youngest brother went to their house. Everyone was eventually fine. Our cousin's mother, who was my dad's older sister, bitched him out big time. It didn't change his behavior, though. He didn't live long, drinking himself to death a few years later, and then we stayed with his sister. We never encountered the strange man again. Hey all, Killer Orange Cat here. First, I had said that I would be doing a stream for Christmas, but this video took a great deal of work, so I won't be able to do that tonight, and I apologize for that. But I will be doing it on Saturday at 9 p.m. Central Time, as usual. I hope all of you who celebrate Christmas have a great Christmas today. I hope that everyone celebrating any holiday greatly enjoyed the holiday. If you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, feel free to hit the subscribe button and bell below, or wait for the icon of Ichigo the cat that will appear at the end of this closing. Leave me a comment to let me know what you thought of the video, and please share it with someone you think might enjoy it. If you have a story you like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please send it to the address included in the description. But most important, make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.